And in this segment, I want to discuss. There's a video that I did that I think all of you guys should go watch maybe after the show. It's about a year or two ago, in which I talked about why conservatives should sort of reassess their, let's say, support for military folk or more so the blind support of the military folk and the law enforcement. And I remember I don't want to say it was backlash because that was to be expected. It's more of course, you say something like that to a group of people that disagree, you're going to be met with some sort of conflict. And this year has been the year where folks are reassessing their, folks that generally support the police in particular. Now, this doesn't really apply to the military as much, but certainly police. Folks are starting to reassess this. There's so many big-time conservatives that have reached out to me about this, but it's obviously a perfect storm, for lack of better terms, when you have the lockdowns and the mask mandates and the enforcement and all of this bullcrap that's been happening over the course of this year. People are really seeing who the enforcement wing of the state actually is and why I always call them the teeth of the state. It's the Bernie Sanders and all of those guys who you may despise, rightfully so, but ultimately it's not them that enforces these laws or orders that they advocate, or the governors. It's not them. It is the police, you know what I mean, in some way. And my colleague over at Blaze, Elijah, brought up it's a great point. He says right-wingers carrying thin blue line flags are totally unaware of what's really going on. Most law enforcement departments in metropolitan areas are not on the side of the people. In fact, they will often protect left-wingers and attack right-wingers, enforce tyranny. Wake up. Now, Elijah Schaffer is one of the ballsiest guys I know. He is going, no matter, it's like basically a hit out on him at this point. And he's going to these protests and to these gatherings, and in which he is front lines. He's front lines, been doing some great reportings. A lot of the videos that you've seen as those riots and stuff broken out was captured by Elijah Schaffer. If you don't watch his show, you should watch his show over at, or you can catch it over at Blaze Slightly Offensive. Yes, I'm going to plug that because he's my colleague, and I work for the Blaze too as well. But he brings up a point that I have been trying to drive home, and it's been, I don't want to say unsuccessful, but it's, a lot of folks, they've grown up in that sort of atmosphere. So it's something that they generally don't understand, that arm, because I think what they do is they look at it like, okay, the state has monopolized the law, right? And so when there is actually bad things that tend to happen, the cleanup crew or the person that assesses it after the fact is the police officers. And then when you consider the detective work or something, when there's actual acts of aggression, again, because they've monopolized the law, that is the institution that does it. So they look at that institution as a net positive thing, because of those, that's what they've grown to not only believe, but that's what's around them, right? So I understand it, and I empathize with it, even that is your particular position. But when you look at the mass amounts of victimless crimes, let's call them that, crimes that are just completely arbitrary. The state said you can't do that. No matter if there's a victim, there is no victim, and there's no contract being broken or something like that. And they will aggress upon you. Of course, you know the drill. If you decide to resist, no matter what it is, you risk being killed. All the numerous amounts of gun control laws that are out there in the world, in this country, that are being enforced by way of the state, and they brag about it. That's kind of what's crazy, how you have these concepts that are antithetical to each other. Yeah, we can talk about the Gadsden flag versus with the thin blue line, or the don't tread on me, and then someone has a thin blue line flag. Yeah, it doesn't kind of make sense. I get it, because it doesn't. But in the same respects, these guys are advocating things that are antithetical to each other. So you talk about the gun control, and people that are on the quote on the right, who are supposedly advocates of gun ownership, really. And even they would say, well, all gun laws are infringements. And then you look to the fact that all of these cops, I don't know if you guys look at some of their Twitter pages, they'll actually brag about confiscating people's guns, right? doing raids and collecting all these guns. Like they're the ones that are doing that, right? And going back to the point and what Elijah is mentioning right now is when you've seen like when the George Floyd protests happened, and we had talked about on this at Blaze. I talked about this at the Blaze, and they would, or because they were told, right, to stand down, they will sit there and watch as entire roads or streets rather of businesses and buildings just be trashed, and they would just sit there and allow it to happen, right? They would sit there and allow it to happen. And then when it came to these mask mandates and some of these lockdowns, you're seeing in certain areas where they're the ones that are, of course, going to enforce these measures. Now, when it comes to like certain sheriffs that have come out and said that they weren't going to enforce it, that's a minority. What a lot of folks don't want to understand, like it's a minority. Like most of them have absolutely no problem enforcing that. You get the wrong guy on the wrong day, and you'll see what happened. Now, it sucks, but definitely when it comes to the lockdowns and the livelihoods being ruined, I get tired of seeing these videos of these officials as well as the police officers sitting here giving people hard times because they do what it is that they do to exist. You know what I'm saying? Their livelihoods. But I love the fact that people are reassessing this position, because I've been making this argument for a very long time that there are two big blocks of people when you consider movements in America. You have the mainstream, the progressives, them generally associated with the Democrats, and then you have the people that are on the other side, more so the conservatives, who generally associate with Republicans. The minute that the Republicans wake up, like Elijah said, to what's actually taking place and reassess some of the positions that they actually have, you'll never see ever in the course of human history such an accelerated move towards liberty, because they exist in such great numbers. So when they decide that, okay, we're going to actually start valuing freedom, right? We are going to actually, doesn't matter who you are, who you work. We're actually going to start valuing freedom, and it starts to manifest itself in not just with their politicians, but, conservative business owners, activists. That's when we get on the other side of this, whatever it is. And I'm not just referring to like the lockdowns or the mask mandates, just general landscape of uber sort of socialistic. I don't use the term crony capitalism, not a thing. Crony socialism. We get on the other side of that once that side wakes up. But because they have generally been very protective of some of these institutions that have been leading the charge and aggressing upon their own people, and the people that they claim to protect, though it's not just them, you get what it is that I'm saying. Because that is their approach, it's a slow move actually towards the opposite way. They have this sort of fantasy ideal about cops and law enforcement, and it's one of those things that I get it. Some of you guys have family. It's like the teachers thing and the nurses thing. You have family members, and folks don't want to come to terms with the fact that a lot of these guys are part of the problem. And if they weren't, in the event that this was changed, the landscape changed, those that you feel are actually good people would really start to show themselves. But it's a thing that must be assessed. I saw this video yesterday. What was it? I don't know if it was the Proud Boys. It was some sort of protest going on, and obviously the cops was giving them a rough time. Doesn't seem to be like what they do with the Black Lives Matter crowd or and whatnot, because they weren't even like being belligerent or anything. And of course they were giving them a hard time, and there was this one side that had like one of the thin blue line flags, and they threw it on the ground and started stepping on it like, we've been supporting y'all for this entire period of time, and this is how y'all, this is what we have right here. This is how you thank us. I get it. And I love to see stuff like that, believe it or not. And some of you guys are going to disagree with me, because that's when you start actually assessing what's going on. You have to come to the realization. It's a hard pill to swallow, but you have to come to that realization if we're going to ever move towards freedom. Conservatives, look, you are the side that will speak of capitalism favorably. Socialism, you speak ill of socialism, as you should. You terms like liberty, libertarianism don't make you like have a stroke like it does with the opposite side. There are enough of you guys to actually put a dent in whatever situation it is that you call the existence of the current system. It's enough of you guys to make positive net change, moving towards freedom. It just comes until you come to realization what's actually taking place here. The left is going to win, and we're going to continue to move towards their side. But a lot of that moving towards freedom comes with you reassessing your position on the support of the law enforcement officers. And this year should have shown you, when you've seen how they've treated you, you've seen what they're being willing to enforce, you're seeing that it's less about serving and protecting you and more about serving and protecting the orders of the politicians, the legislation, the laws by way of whatever Congress, state, local, Fed, whatever. That's more so what it is. And because they've monopolized the law, the generally things that you see that are acts of aggression, murder, theft, all of that, of course they are dealing with that too. But again, we have to discuss all the other victimless crimes that they are willing to use that term loosely, that they are willing to enforce, that are on the books, starting with gun control. But now you're seeing that people's livelihoods are being ruined, and you're seeing who's front lines and making sure that that setup still remains the case. So people are reassessing, and I'm glad that they're reassessing.